Welcome to the Risk Management and Patient Safety podcast presented by Medplace. We're excited to bring you conversations with top risk and patient safety thought leaders from organizations across the country. Please subscribe to get the latest news and content from us, and if you found value in this episode, please share it with your colleagues to create meaningful conversations in your community. And if you're interested in participating as a guest, please send us an email at marketing@medplace.com. Today I'm joined by the CEO of Medplace, Jerrod Bailey.
Hi.
Medplace is the first medical expertise exchange that connects organizations with top practicing doctors and nurses for claims reviews, peer reviews, expert witness testimony, and more. Jerrod holds over 20 years of experience in venture-backed technology companies. He's an expert operator across technology development, user experience, branding and marketing, capital raising, and go-to-market strategy. Jerrod has helped launch over 100 technology startups with corporate new ventures like American Express, Intel, and other notable names. Welcome, Jerrod.
Hey, I'm glad we're doing this. This is pretty exciting. We hear a lot as we interact with people on the risk and patient safety and quality sides of, across the spectrum of, questions around technology and things like that. So it's just good that we're, I think, doing this and kind of opening up a space to have this kind of conversation, make it a little bit less scary, a little bit more approachable for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a big thing in these industries that technology may seem daunting, but it's really not. It's meant to help and kind of enhance.
Well, it's kind of earned, right? I mean, anybody who's been in healthcare, usually the software they're working with is really difficult, right? Mm-hmm. So there's like a reason why they're scared of technology because, more often than not, they get burned by it. So,
right.
Hopefully we can give some best practices and introduce some technology players that we find really interesting along the way.
Yep.
And then ultimately, it's not a technology conversation at all. It's just how do you build, a risk or a claims or a patient safety program for the modern world, because things are different right now than they used to be, 10 years ago.
Right. Absolutely. Going to technology, though, Jerrod, can you provide your perspective on technology? What's the value of it overall?
Yeah, well, really good technology should just sort of disappear, right? It should not be, you shouldn't even have to think about it. And, if you've used like apps like Uber, right? There's a lot of technology there, but we're still ordering a taxi cab. Mm-hmm. And yet the technology has enabled and facilitated a much better experience, right?
Right.
So, technology does a lot of things, right? And it can do so many things that it couldn't do, 20 years ago. We can build so much automation into things that like a busy physician should really not have to do a bunch of overhead, and yet we're still requiring them to do it, right? So there's this gap between what technology is capable of and being used for in other industries and what it's doing, in healthcare, for example. But then technology is also not just like, automating stuff and making, one system talk to another system and automatically do something that a human used to have to do. Right. But it's also about how humans interact with the technology, right? So that gets into a realm called the human-centered design. Now you're getting into user experience design, customer experience. But you're getting into how does a human, with all of our flaws and our limited thinking and ability to make mistakes, how do we interact with technology to get the optimal use out of it? And that ultimately gets into how does the technology itself disappear and it becomes more of an organic experience. So I look at technology from that entire stack of, can you do hardcore, AI and algorithmic thinking and natural language processing all the way to can I build an interface that a busy physician can interact with?
Right.
And that someone with a very little technology background can interact with somebody that is processing a claim, right? How do you meet those users where they're at is another, I think, big part of technology. Now, if you nail all of that stuff, you can create workflows that eliminate 95% of the work that somebody's doing today, right? And if you can do that, if you can recapture all of that wasted work, you can do things like accelerating activities. So there's like really critical activities in, when something bad happens at a hospital, that first few minutes is critical, probably the most critical as far as response, but that first day, the first 48 hours, the first week, the first month. These are really critical time frames for responses to happen. And those responses need things like discovery and understand what actually happened. And, there might be a lot of people to coordinate, right? So technology can take that kind of really critical window of time. It can compress it, as an example, if you're getting rid of all this overhead. Or it can just make things more efficient, right? So you have that army of one nurse who's running risk and maybe quality at his or her hospital. That's a lot to do. And in technology can often get in the way of that. Because not only is it getting in the way of that nurse doing their job, but the physician and other medical staff, she's requiring external medical staff or experts or law firms. It's coordinating around all those people that if your technology is not good, then there's so many places that process can break down, right? Or if you have no technology at all, if you're doing it all manually. So, that's sort of the realm in which I see technology helping. Now, even more broad than that, it's developing analytics on what you're doing. And being able to, there's so many great sources for research and for data mining and for all kinds of things that can help somebody who's just worried about one particular peer review. Can I inject data into my process? Am I recording this? Can I inject the data that I'm recording back into my process and keep the quality of my systems constantly going up? Those are things that only data can do. There's not enough time in the day for a human to sit there and record everything. Or they may be recording it, but actually doing something with that is another step. So this is like the realm of technology that I think we're going to be unpacking, and we'll probably even expand that scope even a little bit more.
Yeah, I think you hit on a couple of really important points of how technology can help these teams that are already stretched very thin. You talked about those nurses that are kind of like an army of one. Technology really can help supplement a lot of the work that they're already doing and bog down with, and focus on the things that are important to not only them professionally, but as the organization as well.
Yeah, 100%. And we're all looking for patient safety. We're all looking to increase the quality of our care. Right? Because that has so many great ramifications. One, we're delivering great care. Two, fewer incidents happen that create liability for us. And and three, it just ultimately it's our brand in the market, right? It's our relationship to our patients and the pride of care that we provide, or that our customers and providers actually provide, and so all of that stuff is in the mix for how do you continue to optimize the systems for great outcomes.
Another point I think you touched on was technology shouldn't be only for those that are power users, and it shouldn't be something that requires extensive amount of training. That can turn a lot of people off to it. Talk about that a little bit, how the simplicity is sometimes essential for technology to be adopted.
Yeah, it's funny. A lot of people who build technology, they just sort of like put the features in. Like here's 1,000 features, and look, I got them all into my software, right? But then it takes a training manual and ongoing training to get anybody familiar with how to use it, right? And then when they do use it, there's so many clicks. People don't realize if you're a physician and you're trying to maximize the amount of work that you're doing in the day, and then you're pausing to click 50 times just to get into a piece of software, that's a problem, right? And so, if you put the effort into designing workflows around human-centered design, some of these other concepts, and you simplify that and you make it so that, ultimately the best software doesn't need an instruction manual. If you need an instruction manual, you built it wrong, or there's still opportunity to optimize it, right? And those are design decisions, and those are thoughtful decisions that you can build into your workflows ahead of time, doing that work on the design side so that your employees and your users don't have to do the work constantly for the rest of the life cycle of that software.
Right, absolutely. So tell us where the idea for Medplace started. And you've described quite a bit about technology now. Can you tell us a little bit about Medplace itself?
Yeah, so interestingly, Medplace was an idea that germinated inside of all places a medical malpractice insurance carrier, right? So there's a carrier, in the U.S. that has this front end process to any claim that's created. Something bad happens in the operating room that might lead to a claim, and that claim might ultimately come to their desk. And they needed to do a much better job of getting what's called a case review done, right? So that means something bad happened, I get all the medical records, I find another similar physician or nurse with the same subspecialty somewhere in the world, someone who's got the credibility and the clinical expertise to really offer a good, current, unbiased opinion. I need to get all my records to that person and find out what they see, right? Did my doctor meet the standard of care? What are some potential issues with that? And what's my potential liability, so that I know how to responsibly navigate the next phases of this. And now you've got things like CRP programs, communication and resolution programs, early resolution programs coming, where that process of discovering what happened and really assessing what happened, not only is it moving up in time, like closer to when the harm event happened, but it also has some requirements around speed, right? So I can't respond early if I can't discover early, right? So this particular carrier has a lot of CRP events and said, look, we need something that's better, something that's more efficient, and something that ideally can generate information back to our clients where they can improve their process and they can improve the quality of their care, if that's an opportunity that's exposed in the process. So this idea of, hey, in the day and age of Uber, could we create an app that makes that entire workflow go faster and can include third parties and physicians and attorneys and others from outside of even the hospital or the carrier? How do you coordinate all those moving parts quickly, right? And so that was where the idea germinated from, and it's since then expanded, but that's essentially where Medplace came from. So we're an app that facilitates that exchange and other exchanges like it. You
mentioned Uber a bit now, and I think when individuals think of technology these days, Uber is one of the kind of foremost thought about companies that comes to mind. So can you explain how that kind of ties into Medplace?
Yeah, Uber is, at the heart of it, it's two things, right? It's a workflow automation tool. It's taken the workflow of getting a taxi and automated it. And it builds some other really interesting technology into, like, the awareness of where I am, what city I'm in, my proximity to drivers, things like that, right? That's all technology things underneath that. And then it's got a really great user interface, right? It's as few clicks as possible to engage a ride. And then it gives you all of these analytics along the way telling you where your driver's at and all the stuff that we never had with taxis because of technology and because of interface innovation, right? But Uber's also a second thing. It's this big group of drivers out in the world. It's a bunch of people like you and I that decide we want to make a side hustle, right? And with nothing more than our car, we can do that. All of a sudden, we can generate revenue for ourselves simply by having a vehicle, or maybe we get a vehicle just to do that type of business. And that's really interesting, right? That created the ability to have lots and lots of drivers. It created the ability to have this sort of highly efficient marketplace that didn't exist before. Taxi cab companies have to have their medallions and their licenses to drive and all that stuff. And there's a lot of overhead to add more drivers to the supply, whereas Uber eliminated that overhead and it really kind of democratized access. Well, imagine that you apply that same model to healthcare, right? We have physicians that are overloaded, and yet we have this highly inefficient system. We have hospitals in the world that aren't being overrun. We have physicians that are being sidelined because of COVID. We've got other hospitals that are, completely saturated, right? And yet we don't have an efficiency in that system to take those resources and sort of use them on demand in other places. Imagine if you did have that. Imagine if you had, expertise in the risk or quality, or peer review areas that could immediately come in and help with particular event type of thing, right? So that's the power of Uber, and we're just applying that to something as sophisticated as medical specialty. But the idea that becomes democratized, that a amazing surgeon that's at Mayo Clinic in Scottsdale, well, his influence is really geographically bound to Scottsdale, right? And yet, if we could liberate that influence and all of a sudden he can influence whole systems or other systems or geographies, that becomes really powerful, right? All of a sudden, we're taking the best minds working together to make medicine better, and we're just using something like the concept of Uber to do it.
Right, that makes sense. Can you explain how does the platform work? How does Medplace work then in that sense? How does the case come in? How does it filter through? How does it end up?
So a lot of what Medplace does today are either for claims teams, so working on claims and cases coming through from that perspective, or we work with quality and patient safety teams who have things like peer reviews. So most hospitals, all hospitals have to do peer reviews. A certain number of those peer reviews should be and often are done externally. Right. But once you have to go outside of your employed physician base, it becomes really difficult to find specialists and things like that. So what we do is, either a peer review is created by a hospital or a clinic, or it's a claim that's created maybe also by a hospital or a clinic or by a third-party administrator or by a carrier. But eventually those things need someone external to look at that case and provide a non-biased opinion. So those come into us. Somebody like a claims person or a risk manager literally logs in to Medplace. They enter the information that they're, some basics about the case. And then they say what is the specialty that they're looking for. And then usually at that point, if they've started that search themselves, it'll take days or weeks, or more often than not, we see months before they find somebody. For us, it's by the next morning, they've got 2 to 4 CVs of actual practicing physicians with great backgrounds that are professional doctors and nurses. They're not professional medical experts. They're just current in the medicine and 10 years or more of experience. They've just got great opinions and perspective on things. But they get to see 2 to 4 of those the next morning. Pick the one that they like, hit go, and then everything else gets automated.
That sounds very convenient compared to the standard you described.
Yeah, it's great. And they get to chat with them, and they get to do a video call with them. It's there's no throwing things over the fence. And so our customers get really a bench of experts and that they can use on demand. So it's pretty nice. It's pretty convenient. And ultimately they end up having either a Zoom call or reports generated for peer reviews, for example, and then they rate. Everyone gets rated. Right? I rate my doctor. How was my review? Just like in Uber, the doctor rates me. How was my claims professional right in the process? And that just drives such great virtuous behavior across the platform. But that's it. I just did in usually 9 days what it took, a few months to accomplish, just because of technology.
A common question I think that would come up, and this we could tie back to Uber, right? Why do the drivers do it? Probably for the money. But as we think through why do the physicians work on Medplace? Obviously, you talked about they're being compensated and they can treat this as extra income. Is there anything else that you've heard from these physicians on why they're interested in Medplace? Yeah,
physicians in general across the board are interested in what other kinds of non-clinical work can they do that pays well, that leverages their backgrounds and their experience. That's one of the reasons we started Medplace, is to create a platform where physicians can start to be known and discoverable and discover for themselves those types of non-clinical income sources, because they do have to balance, right? They are redlining. I talk to more doctors that are walking away from the profession than anything else, and it's really scary, right? These, we can't handle a 10% reduction as a country of our specialists. Right. And so, yes, many of them are looking for income to help sort of balance and figure out how to find balance in their lives, and I think that's great. But I would say more than that, at least the doctors on our network are here to improve medicine. They find the work interesting, right? This idea of deconstructing and sort of forensically looking at what happened and then developing an opinion off that. It's just very stimulating work for somebody who's been in the industry for a long time. But they're also interested in seeing systems improve, right? If their influence can help a critical access hospital in the middle of Wisconsin act and serve their patients at the same caliber that a large system can do, like, that's really fulfilling. Right. That's really going into the the areas of medicine that don't normally have access to them, and filling that gap is really, really rewarding for them. So I would say that's probably the number one reason. Maybe all of those three reasons are the top three for everyone, maybe in slightly different order.
Right, that's fantastic. On a related note to that, so we've talked about the type of individuals and professionals on the platform. So a topic that's on everyone's mind that we keep hearing about is nuclear verdicts and how to mitigate them.
Right.
What role does Medplace play in that?
Well, nuclear verdicts, like if you watch what's been happening with, like medical malpractice cases over the last few years, you've seen it ratchet up. So the cases have gone down, but the payouts have gone up, right?
Absolutely.
And these nuclear verdicts are, really devastating, right? And that's essentially, when you finally go to court and you lose the case, and all of a sudden you've got, multi-million-dollar liability. And so, if you think about it, you hope that no case should ever get there. Right? And there's this, sort of pervasive, and this is driven by a lot of reasons, and certainly not all carriers are like this, but so the deny and defend at all cost sort of mentality certainly has led to some of that. And what you're seeing is a lot of carriers, a lot of hospitals, this is really being led by the hospitals, is you're seeing a lot of early resolution programs and things like that, CRP programs come into play, because if you can start a dialogue with the patient early, and you can ultimately avoid both sides and their costly litigation in years. I mean, these things go for years, right?
Right.
And by the time years are up, you're at five years into a case. People are ready to battle, right? And to get the most as possible. Whereas it's probably better for both parties if something's happening earlier to try to resolve things. What you don't want is you don't want to have a case where there's a clear issue that everyone missed or everyone overlooked.
Right.
And then everyone decides to go litigate it, and you end up on the courtroom steps, and now that issue is front and center. And now not only did you pay for law firms, both sides paid for legal expenses all the way through, but now you're going to be settling. And that's just, there's time lost and all sorts of things. Well, if you can figure out that chink in the armor early, then you might have made different decisions. Right. If you could have figured that out day one, that might make different decisions. So getting your case worked up early is really critical. Right. And really assessing it. And oftentimes you'll see, like, there's certain law firms, many of them will come in already biased to, we're going to litigate this thing. Right. And that's probably not the best decision for anyone, including the provider that was involved. Right. So if they're coming in with, bringing in their expert that they've used for years, or you're using your expert that you used for years, and there's this sort of built-in bias to, hey, let's fight this. You may miss that, or you may just be encouraging your own internal system to not look at it. Right. And if it takes you a long time to do that, the other side is already getting ticked off and mounting legal, and getting their plaintiff's attorneys involved, and there's a lot of vitriol, and there's a lot of stonewalling, and if you can avoid all that by doing these things early, within a couple of weeks instead of 6 months, like, you're already ahead of the game. If you can inject into that accounting for bias, and in bringing in like unbiased reviewers and doing your reviews in a way that helps you mitigate bias, all of a sudden you're starting to get a lot better view, a lot faster of what's going on, and you can make better decisions earlier, right? And it's all hoping to avoid that nuclear verdict, but it's also trying to do the right thing sooner by everybody, right? And the right thing can still make sense from a business perspective and other things, but you can't do any of those things. You can't make a better business decision or do more of the right thing if you don't have the information and you don't have it early enough. So, I think it's really important. That's one of the reasons we were built, is to help, assess these cases better early on.
Right, and I think you touched on an important point, that resolution doesn't necessarily mean monetary resolution. We've heard that quite a bit, that resolution can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people and organizations, But it sounds like those insights are critical no matter what, to getting those insights early on and making sure it's from the right professionals and the right experts.
And we'll bring in some of our customers and some others in this space that are managing risk and we'll do from a small clinical, critical access hospital to, something large like Ascension.
Right.
Like what Ascension does from a CRP perspective is really outstanding. And the model that they've presented and the data that they can show around it, when you talk about it's really not payouts that are the vast majority of what happens in CRP. There's so many other things that are available that once you understand the particulars of the case, you can start to make those decisions.
Right. So how are risk managers, risk leaders, and patient safety leaders responding to Medplace?
Well, I mean, if you've ever been that army of one and you've been sitting you just got your annual audit and, the Joint Commission or whoever you're using is saying, look, your independent peer reviews your process is broken, and you know it because you've been sitting on these things for months and you cannot find a doctor who won't ghost you, right? I just need another cardiologist to review my current cardiologist. But many of our armies of one risk managers or quality folks have run into that problem, right?
Yeah.
So when they use us for the first time, they log in, they type some basic information, and then hit enter, and then by the next morning they're picking out their favorite physician and they're interacting with them like it's and then they're done within a week and a half, like the thing that took months. It's a really rewarding thing for us to do and to hear from our customers. But we had a claims person that does a ton of. She's working at a carrier, and she said out of 100 reviews, I've never had a bad doctor. Like that's really a testament to. I mean, we put a lot of effort into how we recruit and all that kind of thing, but I love hearing that because that means the technology is getting out of the way and they're just getting to bedrock on these decisions they have to make, and they're doing it efficiently.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, our customers are really important to us, and I think we're really important to them. As I say to everyone in the company, we have two things to live by: empathy and essentialism. Right? Absolutely. Are we building an essential tool for people? Meaning, if I lost it, it would hurt, right? This thing helps me. And empathy, meaning that we have a lot of stakeholders involved. Are we empathizing with all of them? And that is that empathy reflected in our design and in our efficiency, and even just in how we talk about ourselves and how we talk about our customers.
Right. Awesome. So what process improvements can these risk managers and risk leaders and patient safety leaders expect by using Medplace?
Well, first of all, this podcast it's not going to be a commercial on Medplace long term. This is really going to be a space where we bring in all sorts of people. So, yep. But to help introduce people to who we are, just why do we care, I think is important. Why are we opening up a space to talk about these things? But yeah, as far as Medplace goes, anyone who uses our tool, if they've ever had to request insight from a physician or a nurse that they don't employ, even if they had to request it from one that they do employ, they know the difficulty of that process. Yeah. And our platform works with both. You can use our doctors, you can use your doctors, but it's always a shock when they do something and that thing is done, a few days later through automation. It's always a surprise. So I would say the one thing to expect is to be surprised. We really have spent a lot of time designing around humans to make this thing delightful to use. So that's probably one. Another one is just the quality of the folks that we use. We're not a directory of professional medical experts, right? I mean, there's like Jerrod Pro and Seek and all these like services that are built to sort of give you what I would say, whether earned or not, kind of mercenaries to sort of tell you what you want to hear.
Right.
And that's not always the case, but I think that too often that's been the case with those types of companies. We're not like that. We're just practicing physicians that want to give back, and they're trained to give unbiased feedback because they know the importance of that later downstream in the decision making. And yeah, they're just busy doing really good medicine all day.
Right.
So that's the other thing that I think to sort of set expectations, anyone who uses us, is get ready for some great doctors that your doctors that are being reviewed would be proud to be reviewed by. And that's one of the questions we ask our docs is, when they sign up, is we say, they say, well, should I do this? Why should I do this? And we say, if you were being reviewed in any capacity,
right,
would you want yourself, someone at your quality doing it? And inevitably they say, yeah, I would, right? So that's part of how they give back to their peers. So anyway, I think those are some of the expectations.
Or funny enough, how you describe it, sometimes they'll describe their ideal reviewer and it ends up mirroring exactly their resume. Or
funny how that
their
works out, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I want an Ivy League doctor
Right.
who has X amount of years of training.
Yeah, but hey, I might want a doctor who's practicing in a rural setting,
right?
Because I want that peer
empathy.
Going back to empathy, right? Like somebody who's got all the resources in the world in the middle of Manhattan is going to have a very different perspective. So It's not just can I find the top doctors in the world, but can I find a great practicing physician that has empathy and understands where I'm at in my practice, what I have access to.
Right, absolutely.
So
that's great. Is there anything else, Jerrod, you'd like to let the listeners know?
Yeah, let us know what you guys want to hear about. You'll see us introduce over the coming weeks and months lots of speakers. We're going to have people that are running risk or quality programs. We're going to have people running CRP programs. We're going to have technology companies that are injecting really interesting technology into different parts of the process.
Right.
We're going to have thought leaders. We'll have carriers and TPAs and other people within the the sort of the constellation of stakeholders out there coming in and talking about how they view things. And so if you're interested in any of those topics, let us know in the comments. Let us message us directly. You'll have a way to message us through this. And if you want to be a speaker yourself, by all means, we encourage you to reach out and we'll set up some time with you and find out where you have a point of view on things. And if it looks like we've got a slot open, we'll invite you.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for listening to the Risk Management and Patient Safety podcast presented by Medplace. Like Jerrod said, if you got value from this episode, subscribe and share. If you'd like to participate, we're always open to that, and send us an email at marketing@medplace.com or reach out just anywhere on our website. We're happy to take a look at that. Also, feel free to follow Jerrod on LinkedIn and follow Medplace. We'll post a lot of content on there as well, and Jerrod's very easy to reach there via InMail. So thanks, Jerrod.
Great. Thanks, Nestor. Appreciate it. Thanks everybody.